All right. Ready to hop across the pond. We're going deep on Brexit today.
Sounds good.
But, forget the headlines we've all seen. We're talking about how it's really shaking things up for, everyday Brits.
Right.
And the thing is, even people who weren't exactly EU fans in the first place, they're paying attention now, really watching closely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And it makes sense because this isn't about trade agreements and all those economic figures. This is about the human side of this huge political decision.
Exactly.
And what we're seeing over there, it's got everyone's attention globally.
Okay, so no more talk of economic forecasts and all that. We're getting into the nitty-gritty, the stuff nobody expected. Even Saudi Arabia pops up. You'll never believe this. So buckle up, because we're unpacking it, all the promises, the reality, everything. And then the big question, can you actually UN Brexit? Is that even a thing?
It's a fascinating question. But let's rewind for a sec. Those promises, remember the big one. £350 million more every week for healthcare.
Oh, yeah, that was everywhere. But looking at it now, you're telling me the IMF, they're predicting Britain's economy could be one of the worst performing That's a bit different from more money for healthcare.
Yeah, it's a big difference. And it's impacting everything. Exports to the EU are down 17%. Imports down 23%. Those are big hits. Industries are scrambling to adjust.
And what about healthcare? Imagine needing to see a specialist and they tell you the wait is 18+ weeks.
Wow.
That's the reality right now. Not more funding, just a system under even more strain than before.
Right. And this is where those big, scary numbers, they turn into real lives.
Yeah.
Of very real human cost. Junior doctors, nurses, they're the ones dealing with it head on, the heavy workloads, wages not keeping up.
Right.
It's no wonder 1 in 7 British trained doctors are working abroad now.
It's a complete flip. I mean, it used to be that Britain was like a magnet for healthcare workers from all over Europe.
Right.
This is like the opposite of what they promised, isn't it?
It is. They wanted controlled immigration, but...
Yeah. Okay. Net migration to Britain. It's actually more than doubled since Brexit. It went from 335,000 in 2016 to a massive 685,000 in 2023.
Wow. So much for controlled immigration.
Yeah.
And a jump like that's got to put pressure on housing, right?
Absolutely. Rising prices, more evictions. It's no wonder people are scared.
Yeah.
A recent poll found 35% of British adults are worried about becoming homeless in the next year. That's huge. And it reflects a very real fear about the future.
That's a punch to the gut. It's no wonder there's this brain drain happening, with people who have the skills looking for something better somewhere else. And this is where Saudi Arabia comes in, right?
It is. It seems strange, but Saudi Arabia is becoming a real hotspot for British talent, especially in engineering and construction. You see, their Vision 2030 plan, it's incredibly ambitious, massive infrastructure projects, new cities, and they need skilled workers to make it all happen.
Okay, so they need people, but why are skilled workers leaving Britain? It can't just be about sunshine and dates, right? No, not just that. Think about what we just talked about. The economic uncertainty, the pressure on public services, the rising cost of living.
Right.
It all creates this environment where, well, if you can find better opportunities, you take them.
So Saudi Arabia's gain is, in a way, because of Britain's loss. It's like a side effect no one saw coming.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder if Britain, with its history, its connections, is struggling like this after Brexit, what does that mean for other countries? Countries with even less stable economies thinking about leaving the EU?
That's a good question. And it's something a lot of people are asking, especially in Britain. They're wondering if they can un-Brexit themselves out of this. You said it yourself, fascinating question, but is it even possible?
Now, that's where things get really interesting. Almost 79% of young Britons want to rejoin the EU.
Wow.
But it's not as simple as just, having another vote.
Oh, I bet. So what's stopping them from just hitting the undo button?
Well, the current UK government, they're not exactly jumping at the idea of rejoining. And even if they were, getting back into the EU, it's not like getting back together with an ex.
Okay.
The EU wasn't just sitting around waiting for them to crawl back.
So no, we can work it out, playlist for Britain then. But seriously, what would it even take? I mean, they were a part of it for so long. Wouldn't it be easier the second time around?
You'd think so, right? But it's not that simple. Think about it. The EU has rules, standards they've built up over decades. Britain leaving, it shook things up. Going back in wouldn't be, picking up where they left off. Plus, there's no guarantee the EU would even be open to it. And if they were, it wouldn't be on the same terms as before. Think stricter rules, tougher negotiations.
Okay, so no warm welcome back party. More like, all right, but this time read the rule book.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. Some of those stricter terms Britain might face, they're the ones they championed when they were part of the EU.
Oh, the irony. It's like they built this maze, left it, and now they want back in, but it's even harder to navigate.
Exactly. And all of this is playing out on a global stage. The rest of Europe is watching closely.
So it's like everyone else has front row seats to the Brexit show, and they're like, pass, I don't want a ticket.
You could say that. It's a real-world example of what happens when you leave a political and economic union like the EU. And it's got everyone thinking twice, even the most vocal critics.
Okay, so it's not just about Britain anymore. Their choices, their struggles, it's having a ripple effect.
Precisely. And those ripple effects, those are what we're going to unpack next. Because while Brexit might be a British story, the lessons, well, they're for everyone. It's like, imagine, right, you're leading a country and you're thinking, maybe leaving the EU is the way to go. But then you see Britain, strong economy, deep history, and they're struggling to even, like, get their infrastructure projects off the ground.
So you're saying it's giving those leaders second thoughts, like, whoa, maybe not.
Oh, it's more than second thoughts.
Yeah.
Remember those big speeches about ditching the EU? They've gotten awfully quiet, haven't they?
Yeah, it's like they're watching a slow-motion train wreck and thinking, better stay put.
Exactly. And that's the ripple effect we're talking about. It's not just numbers and spreadsheets, you know. It's about real people, everyday lives being impacted. And I think that's what's really hitting home for these skeptical leaders.
Because it's not just theory anymore. It's like we're talking about doctors and nurses leaving because they can't make ends meet, families facing eviction because they can't afford rent, young people who just don't see a future.
Exactly. It's the human cost, the toll it's taken on Britain. And that's a story that goes beyond borders, beyond languages. It's universal.
And then you've got these infrastructure projects grinding to a halt, like that tunnel under the Thames. We talked about that.
Yeah.
15 years, £300 million spent, and they haven't even started digging.
I know, it's wild.
It's like they're stuck in the mud while all these skilled engineers are packing their bags for Riyadh.
It really shows you how connected all these issues are. Lack of skilled workers, rising costs, political instability, it all adds up. And it makes you wonder.
If there's any going back.
Yeah.
Can Britain actually un-Brexit their way out of this? Or is it, like, is the damage already done?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's no simple answer. Michel Barnier, you know, he led the EU's negotiations with Britain. He said the door is open for them to come back.
Oh, really? So there's hope. A chance for a reunion.
Well, not so fast. There's a catch. It wouldn't be a walk in the park. Rejoining, it wouldn't be on the same terms as before. Remember those stricter rules we talked about? Those would apply to Britain, too.
So it's not as easy as just saying we're back and expecting everyone to, like, pick up where they left off.
Not a chance. Imagine trying to squeeze back into a pair of shoes you've outgrown. It's going to be a tight fit. Britain would probably have to adopt the euro, join the Schengen area, and follow all the regulations they, used to help create.
So less of a grand reunion, more like showing up to a party after starting a huge fight. Awkward.
Exactly. And that's assuming the EU even wants them back.
Yeah.
All 27 member states would have to agree. And after the whole Brexit saga, let's just say there might be some trust issues.
It's like a bad breakup where one person realizes they made a mistake, but the other person has already moved on. So it's not even really about if they can un-Brexit. It's, can they afford to just keep going like this? And does the EU even want them back at this point?
It's a real standoff. Politically, economically, everyone's kind of holding their breath. But even if Britain stays on this path, what they're going through, it's got everyone else taking notes.
You're saying this isn't just a British problem anymore?
No way. It's a warning sign, for anyone who's wondering about working together, being connected globally. Brexit shows what happens, how complicated it gets when you try to untangle things.
So for, like, the average person, not just in Britain, all over Europe, even further, what does this mean for them?
It means we can't just sit back and watch. Our leaders' decisions, the votes we make, they have real consequences. Brexit is a wake-up call. Those consequences, they can be huge and they last.
It's like that saying, when one domino falls.
Exactly. We're all connected.
Yeah.
What happens over there matters over here. Brexit is just one example.
Wow, okay. We covered a lot today, from, like, promises that didn't pan out, healthcare struggling, to Saudi Arabia, of all places, benefiting. And this whole un-Brexiting thing could be even harder than leaving was.
It's a lot. And I think the big takeaway is this Brexit story, it's not over. What happens next? The decisions made, they'll be felt in Britain, in Europe, even for how countries work together, period.
You've given us a lot to think about, for sure. One thing I'm left with is this. If Britain, with all its resources, its history, if they're struggling this much, what about everyone else? What happens if those other dominoes start falling?
That's the question, isn't it? The world is watching. Whatever we learn from Brexit, it's going to shape things for a long, long time.
And on that note, that's our show. But keep thinking about that question. Knowledge is power. The more we understand this crazy world, the better we'll handle whatever comes next.
Couldn't agree more. Stay informed, stay engaged. Don't stop asking those tough questions.
And join us next time for another deep dive into the stories that matter.